Good morning, everybody. John Spielka here with GAI Insights, bringing you your Gen AI news briefing, rating your top news important, essential, or optional. This morning we have Adam Rappaport, Tim Andrews, and Dr. Amanda Fetch. Hello, Amanda. Hey, we've got interesting stuff here, everything from Ethan Mollick's guide to new technologies to what, the automation of coding at a whole new level. So let's see here. We are going to start off. Oh, also remember you can look at the articles at gaiinsights.com/articles if you want to follow along. And we, of course, have a newsletter we sign up after, and you can get access to that. And today we're going to start off with Tim. And let me introduce this article. Okay, share screen. All right. We have Ethan Mollick talking about using AI right now. And Ethan does a good job of every few months he puts out which AI to use. On this one, he talks about the combination of Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT. He goes through the pricing models, how to use deep research, how to use voice mode, and just in general working with AI. What do you think here, Tim?
I think, as usual, this is a very good article. I'd probably give this an essential because most people can use the refresher, if nothing else. And it's a nice comprehensive summary of everything that's going on. It's a relatively brief read, but it's not trite or trivial. So it really gives you some nice, sorry about that, some nice frameworks for choosing which models to use. It's mostly about retail models, but again, the frameworks and ideas apply, I think, in general. And I think it's good for the AI leader to understand this is what your employees and everybody around you is learning and using on a day-to-day basis. So that's, to me, that's always a critical understanding. I know oftentimes when I would talk to CEOs about emerging technologies and CIOs and CTOs, they would be so proud of their latest version. You know, if I go all the way back to the mid 90s in an insurance company, of their latest version of their IBM mainframe interfaces. And I would say, great, it's a great improvement over what you did, but it doesn't matter because your customers are using Excel. That's what they're comparing you to, Excel on a PC. They're not comparing you to the last version of your software. And so it's really important for leaders to understand this is what you're being compared to. Absolutely. So I think it's both good and educational.
All right, headed for essential in this one. What do you think here, Adam?
I was in the important camp, but I think Tim makes some good points. I could support essential. I actually think he is overlooking Grok in this conversation, especially when he talks about ChatGPT really being the hands down leader with voice. I think he's overlooking it there. The Grok deep research is also excellent. I think he hasn't actually played enough with the tool he's like, well, if you use X, then it's probably helpful because it's integrated. But Grok is a very powerful standalone state-of-the-art model as well. And we're waiting imminent on the drop of the next one. But overall, it does paint a great landscape. I've actually already shared this across to someone I'm mentoring within my own organization, who I was encouraging over the next week here to just pick a model and get started. And he has really practical advice about what people should be doing to really develop the skills around using these things.
All right, Amanda.
I think I'm important. I wouldn't go essential only because if we go down, it says working with AI, all of those key points, I feel like the leader should know by now. Like, give the AI context to work with, be clear about what you want. Don't say, write me a marketing email, give it step-by-step directions. I feel like that's a point to basically go into on this that's a little large, that I feel like, and then it says like to troubleshoot, beware of hallucinations and things like this. I feel like a lot of this should be, I don't know if I want to necessarily say common sense at this point, but I don't think a lot of this is reinventing the wheel. I think like what Tim said, it's like a refresher, but I feel like if you're an AI leader at this point, you should have been well aware of a lot of this. So I feel like this could be redundant for many. So I wouldn't say I'd go beyond important on this.
Yes. And Amanda, you started saying, you think you're important. We think you're important too. I'm just selling it. Guys, what do you say, man?
John, I would say essential based on some of our conversations with a variety of leaders, right? I would say majority of them still don't know the basics. So a ready reckoner for all of them.
All right. So, yeah, I think I can give it an essential. I was in the important camp too, but I agree with you, Ankaj. I think the market still needs it. All right. Next, essential for our friend Ethan. Next up.
Okay, the next one comes from the CIO magazine and talks about why CIOs must embrace persona-based AI.
All right. What'd you think here, Adam?
Yeah, I was thinking of actually taking a pass and giving this an optional. It has a lot of really high level considerations which are fairly obvious, and it summarizes at the end. It says by tailoring AI to how different personas work, CIOs can drive adoption, accelerate productivity, and unlock real business value. I mean, that's basically saying, look, use agents for specific purposes, which is not much of an insight, frankly. It does a really good job of putting lipstick on the pig, but at the end of the day, it's just saying, look, you can tailor AI to purposes, and that's a pretty transparent point in my book.
Yep. All right. So obvious things here. What do you think, Tim? Good for optional on this one?
Yeah, content free, 100% buzzword compliant.
All righty. So we get the buzzword generator going here. Dr. A, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And this was kind of the point I was driving home in the last one too. I feel like a lot of it is not new. So I'm optional.
All right, optional. Ankaj, any problem with optional on this bad boy?
No, John.
All right, optional it is. On to Harvey.
Yep. So, John, I'm having some problem with my browser. Can you please take the next one up?
Will do. Coming up. All right, so let me go ahead and present this wonderful window of Harvey. All right, here we have Harvey transforming legal work. It's a Claude article, talks about how it helps with, long text, performance while looking at a lot, bigger documents across the Harvey platform. AI-powered legal services, not a lot of data in here, kind of a product announcement. I was really disappointed I'm on this. I'm going to give this an optional. The reason I was disappointed is I think that the idea of services software is a huge issue. Harvey's a big name. We helped a little case on it, Harvard Business School public sources case. It's a very interesting domain, but I'm going to have to give this an optional. What do you think here, Amanda?
Yeah, I agree, Dr. John. There's not a lot of substance in here. I mean, it could have been, I feel like, a good use case, but there's just not a lot of information. So I'm on optional.
All right, optional it is. What do you think, Adam?
Agreed. I'm finding a trend with these Anthropic use cases that really are just really seem to be commercials lately. They haven't gotten into any detail. They're just like, look, people are using Claude and they're doing amazing things, and we're like, yeah, that's what they do with AI models. You need to give us more. Give us some insight, or give us some way that we can actually use this or learn from it.
Yeah,
and they aren't delivering.
Yeah, it was very disappointing because, as you know, most of you know me, my dual mandate. I work half time with Manat up here, which is a law firm, and I thought this could be really interesting, and it turned out it's a great PR, but it should have been done as a PR piece, and maybe that's what it is. That is what it is, literally. Maybe that's what it was advertised as, but it was disappointing as containing any content. It does reinforce the big idea that you want to remain model agnostic. So Harvey, remember, started and got a lot of their advantage because they buddied up with OpenAI very early. And I believe they even got some investment from OpenAI. So the fact that they're now integrating Claude, and it wouldn't surprise me if they integrate others, is another indication that these big models are commoditizing and that you want to stay model agnostic as much as possible.
All righty. We're headed for the big O on this one. Ankaj, any problem with that?
No, John.
All right. Optional it is. Let's see. Let me get to the next one. We've got coding agents have crossed a chasm. Interesting article here. Let me stop that screen and share another. All right, coding agents have crossed the chasm here. Very interesting, I thought, essay that talks about the difference between simply doing simple tasks, really, with coding, and what looks like more of a true kind of partnership with the person and the machine, if you will. So let's see. On this, we had Amanda. What do you think?
Yeah, Dr. John, I like this article. I rated this as important. The facts are that these coding agents, whatever we want to call these things, these tools are getting better and better at this point. And I've mentioned other tools that aren't mentioned here, but they're able to debug in front of us. So they're almost like going through whatever task we ask them. So, the ones I work with, I'll say, I feed it a CSV file and I say, hey, I need to pull a logistic regression on this. I want to minimize my log loss. I want to do X, Y, Z. I tell it everything, and then it'll start debugging, and maybe it'll get to a bug in the code, and then it'll say, oh, and it'll pretty much say what's wrong with it, and it'll rerun it again, these tools. So it does really work with us. This stuff does really work. I use tools that literally do this in front of my eyes. I think they're amazing. But the article does say, and it does ring true, that we can't go into this knowing nothing at all. You still need a basis of data science because, as I said, how would you know you have a logistic regression you're working with? You got to minimize log loss if you've never heard of this before. So, I mean, it could assist with that. I'm not going to say it can't if you ask it the right questions, but it is nice to have that background. Also, the fact that a lot of leaders I see are still against these tools. They don't trust them. They're like, well, how is the code optimized? How can we trust the computer to optimize it? And but guess what? The fact of the matter is, if you're telling all your employees to get out there from scratch and learn Python and R, I just think you're starting to become a dinosaur, and we got to start moving on. So I think this article was saying, again, hey, we're in the future now. Use these tools. So I rated it important.
All right. That was almost an essential plea there, but I heard important as the rating. What do you think here, Tim?
Yeah, I gave this an important as well. It's anecdotal. If it was more systemic, I would have given it an essential. But it's interesting, it's anecdotal. Again, you can't tell inflection points right until you're pretty far past them and you can look backwards. So he's claiming an inflection point. He's got a good argument, so it's worth reading. But without more data, it's hard to tell if he's really correct. It'll take a little while. But we're moving fast enough that these days a little while might be a week or two. I agree 100% with his experience, because this is my experience as well. It's just remarkable how fast these coding tools have gotten better. And so I would say if you're in software development, this is essential, and for everybody else, important.
All right, yeah, leaders in software development, that's for sure, one way or another. So what do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I agree. Important. I use Codex from OpenAI as well as Jules from Google, and they will do the small routine tasks for me. Oh, update this button or move this thing over there, or even add this little bit of capability. And it's exactly, he has a really accurate assessment of it. It's a competent, determined intern at this point.
Yeah.
So it's a good assessment of where we are in terms of the progression here. There's a lot of hype. I think this really grounds it in a very pragmatic way.
Yeah, I actually thought he was making the case it's even more than that, that when you can share context, as he says in the bigger problem with debugging, where he asks it to do the diagram and then, allows him to find the
that almost itself is essential, just that one idea.
Yeah, I thought that, and, really as a collaborator, co-intelligence here, and I think he does a good job toward the end of answering some of the, the naysayers. Anyway, Ankash, I'm definitely an important lean toward essential. Where are you on this?
Definitely important for me, John.
Okay, important it is. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to the next one. Recalculating costs and benefits of generative AI. I have a prediction that Tim is going to hate this article. Tim.
I hate this article. Yeah, it's amazing to me that HBR often has seminal articles and incredible insights, and at the same time publishes an article like this that once again is really pretty much content free. This one isn't really even all that buzzword compliant. Um, it's just, you know, it's just mush and says nothing, and the robots could have done a much better job in much less time. In fact, the robots would have said, there's nothing to say here, just don't publish this.
So if you go down the end, Ankash, the three things to do at the end of this article, I think it says something like, do important stuff, do it well, and iterate or something. Anyway, it's really, let's see, determine the most relevant. Now there's a thought. Prioritize and optimize. Okay, and then iterate. Yo-ho. All right. Well, our friends at
And
INSEAD.
do act.
This is a professor at INSEAD, and so
Yeah.
what can you do? All right.
Yeah.
We're going
All I
definitely.
can say is wow.
Anybody else want to
HBR.
jump on this and can we beat it up a little more, or you want to get going? What do you think, Adam? You're on mute, my friend.
Yeah, no, I was trying to get back to the screen here. I'm happy to let it lie.
Okay, optional it is. Amanda, optional, you okay with that?
Yeah. Yep.
Ankash?
Yes, John.
All right. Let's go to reinforcement learning. Teachers of test time scaling. Say that 10 times fast. What do you think, Adam? Teachers of test time scaling.
So I think it's optional. It's research. It's super interesting research. I like the way Sakana approaches generative AI. They just seem to think differently. Everything we see come out of them is just coming at it from a slightly unique model. And here it has to do with reinforcement learning. And it's a bit of a funny concept, but basically the idea is that you, instead of using reinforcement learning to train a model to solve a problem, you actually use reinforcement learning to train a model to be a good teacher, to explain the problem well. And then they have what they call reinforcement learned teachers. And then they use these teachers to then train a model. And they find that out of a much smaller model, so a lot faster and a lot more cost efficiently, they can then train a model because they have a good model to explain things to the student, the final model that they're training, rather than just trying to give the answers to the student. They've gotten better at teaching the student or making a model that can do that teaching. So it's a very, very interesting approach. I think it'll reap great rewards. Other people will probably leverage this quickly as well in reinforcement learning on future models, but it is research and it's probably optional.
Interesting. I was leaning more toward important for all the reasons you said it, and that when you say teaching a student, that student is often a model, and seems to be a much more effective way to do it. I don't know. What do you think here, Amanda?
Yeah, I actually was important, but I also could see Adam's point where we're not necessarily, like, in other words, this isn't something being used consistently right now or anything. It is, to his point, more research, but the whole concept of it, I think, is interesting. So I actually was leaning on important as well, Dr. John, on this one.
All right, Timmy, what's up? Can't hear you.
I'd vote for important on this one because, again, important doesn't say you have to read this today. It just says you ought to read this if you have time. And I think that's a reasonable place for this thing. This is a good idea. It's amazing it hasn't happened before. Anybody who's familiar with Richard Feynman, this was his favorite mechanism. He said, if you really want to make sure you understand something, teach it to a 12-year-old. And in fact, the other interesting thing that I would propose to these folks, if they're listening, is, why don't you make the reasoning model a teaching model? Why don't you make the final model a teaching model? Because wouldn't it have the same effect, right? And maybe be a better reasoner if it could explain it to a 12-year-old. So it's interesting, and it's worth reading if you have time. Absolutely.
All right, Ankash, your last word here. Any reason not to go important? Not to force the issue. All right, important.
No, John. I think important. Yes, John.
All right. Last one, Arc Institute's first virtual cell model of state, called State. What'd you think here, Amanda?
Yeah, I was optional on this one. It's definitely a use case about genetics and things like this. Domain-specific foundation models for biology. So I feel like it's pretty specific, but I don't know for the average leader, as we say, what exactly they're going to do with this article. Because again, it's so specific, but yet at the same time, I don't know if it has a ton of information. It's one of those kind of strange anomaly articles. So for me, this is very optional.
All right, we got optional here. What do you think, Adam?
Agreed. It's interesting. It might make a huge difference. We see this all the time, especially in medicine and bioscience, right? We have these things, you just think about the impact they could have potentially on how quickly we're going to be able to do research and find new things and understand things and get to the solutions and solve these problems more efficiently. Incredible, life-changing stuff. But in terms of the day-to-day business of an AI leader, it's not very relevant.
All right. This is one of those bifurcated ones where, like for Vivek, who's listening here, and for people in life sciences, this is super essential. Like, get this to all your people today, because this is revolutionary. But it's quite specific to research. And although as a citizen, I would say, boy, if I could vote dollars directly, this is where I'd put them. Because the progress we can make with these kind of models is likely to be literally life-changing.
Yeah, I wonder if we should give it as an example of, this is going to be foundational, right, in terms of how these businesses work. I just think we're going to, I was looking at some data, on economic returns that have been, making the rounds in Silicon Valley, and a very small number of stocks create all the economic returns, and I think we're going to see, companies in every industry who break out and do something radical like this, and really create a huge value. So I don't know. I mean, it is super specific. I'm almost tempted to give it an important as an example of something that will happen in different industries. You know what I mean? So I don't know. All right, we'll give it optional. I'm overwhelmed by the mob. I feel like I'm in the French Revolution, and I'm a nobleman. All right. Yeah. All right. Any announcements, Adam? Amanda? Tim? Anything going on in the legal world? All right. All right. We have one essential, two importance, and four optionals. All right. Very efficient day today. Thank you, Ankaj. Ankaj, any announcements or anything from you as well?
No, John.
All right. Have a great AI day, everybody. Take care. I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye now.